let's move on to something which is good. But again, both of us have seen Blue Ruin, which is this very low budget feature by Jeremy Saulnier, which is, well, I think it's an extraordinary piece of work. It opens on this kind of image of disturbed domesticity. We have a camera crawling through a house. It discovers somebody soaking in a tub who is disturbed by a noise outside. You think that he's worried about somebody attempting to break in, but he then jumps out the window and you find out that he is actually the interloper. He is Dwight, and he's a guy who's now living in a rust-bitten Pontiac, the Blue Ruin of the title. He's in a very sort of brief period of time with very little dialogue, almost no dialogue at all. You get to see snapshots of his life, scavenging for food in a dumpster, shut out of the sort of the fun land of life in Delaware. And then a police officer comes to find him and says, you need somebody with you when you hear this. So-and-so has been released. And immediately the look on his face tells you that there is a terrible thing has happened in his past, and you start to understand this terrible thing's happened. The next thing, he goes looking for a weapon, to beg, borrow, or steal a weapon. And after the opening 20 minutes, which are almost wordless and which pretty much cover the ground of almost, most standard generic revenge thrillers, the film then, rather than simply rehashing what's gone before, kind of asks, well, what happens next? And what happens next is that our central character, Dwight, is then put on this kind of road to damnation, which involves his path crossing with his sister. One of the fascinating things about the film is, whereas most revenge narratives concede only that the central character is damaged in that they're hollow or somehow emotionally dead, in this case, we are presented with somebody who is genuinely broken, fractured, weak, somebody who looks like they really embody that thing that so many sort of revenge thrillers, violent thrillers tell you they're about, that violence begets violence and violence destroys everything around it. Here's a clip of Dwight and his sister.
I wish I had more time. Got an asset inventory that can't push. Do you need money?
No. Did you get my letter? I sent it after I crossed the bridge. It was a postcard.
No. When?
A couple of days ago.
Well, postcards take more time. Dwight, I'm not following.
I sent it on my way to Deerfield.
I know he's out, if that's why you're here. The DOC sends a notification and a restraining order. Let's not...
I'm sorry I left.
I'm sorry, too. With this busted sandwich.
I have had worse.
You need to put the registration for the Bonneville in your name if you still have it. An extra set of keys if you want.
It's gone.
As far as the estate goes, you're still owed $2,800. There's still a box of your things.
Keep it all.
I don't want it, Dwight.
No, it's fine. I'm not used to talking this much.
It's what people do.
So what I like about the film, and you've seen it as well, and I think you admire it as well, is that on the one hand, I think it's brilliantly told in terms of its visual storytelling. There's this whole thing, show, don't tell. When you're talking about telling a story as far as cinema is concerned, there are two ways of doing it. One of them is to have the dialogue explain everything, to have characters tell you what's going on. The other one is to have the film show you what's going on. And show, don't tell is a sort of mantra. As I said, the opening 20 minutes of this, which are virtually silent, dialogue free, there's ambient sound, obviously, do a really fantastically economic job of setting up a complex situation, explaining to you who this character is, explaining where this character is in their life, and sort of giving you a sense of how they have come to be this damaged, fractured man. What the rest of the movie then does is to follow his path through the inevitable consequences of this character being let out of prison. And it becomes a story about how violence begets violence, in which, victim becomes killer, in which families turn against families. And underneath it all is a kind of underlying anxiety about any culture built upon the right to bear arms and the idea of, the weapons and an eye for an eye, that none of this stuff is going to solve anything at all. But what I really like is, it's very poignant, it's very moving, it's also very gripping. There are moments that when there is violence in it, it's quite astonishingly repellent, in that there's something horribly matter-of-fact about it, but also horribly kind of grisly and visceral. I think it has a terrific performance by Macon Blair, who's the central guy who plays Dwight, who, when we first meet him, is this kind of dishevelled, bearded character, about sort of half an hour and 20 minutes in, after an encounter with a razor blade and a stolen wardrobe, suddenly emerges as even more sort of nebbishy and even more kind of withdraw. He's the kind of guy who would make Dustin Hoffman in Straw Dogs look like, right from the outset, like a man of action. So I think it's a very well constructed thriller. It's gripping. You want to know what happens next. You want to know what happens to people. You care about the people. You genuinely care about the people in it. Secondly, it's a story which unfolds with twists and turns, which, you know, do genuinely take the narrative in interesting moral ways and present you with a number of moral issues. It has a dark underlying sense of humour, but it's never laughing at itself. There's a kind of graveside humour about it. Some people have compared it to the Coen brothers and to Blood Simple and Fargo, although I think that reference only goes to a certain extent. But I just thought as a piece of stripped down, you know, right, cut back to the bone storytelling, it was really well done. And I found it really gripping, and I really sympathised with the characters, and I thought it was a really impressive piece of work.